just want to confirm that I'm not audible and you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
For joining the regional briefing session in preparation for the informal SBSTTA 24 meeting that is being convened by the Secretariat to the Convention on Biological Diversity next week. I'd like to recognize the participation of Honorable Mr. Walter H. Robon, the Deputy Premier from Bermuda, Dr. Douglas Slater, the Assistant Secretary General of Human and Social Development Program of the CARICOM Secretariat, Dr. Hezekiah Benitez, the Chair of SBSTTA 24, Dr. Alexander Sastakov from the CBD Secretariat, who is the Secretary of the SBSTTA 24 session, Ms. Helena Brown, the Bureau Member representing the Caribbean region in the SBSTTA Bureau, Dr. Spencer Thomas from Grenada, who will be helping us facilitate our discussions today, Dr. America Singh from the CARICOM Secretariat, and Ms. Tesha, our project partner in this project. Before we start, let me give you a little bit of a background to the ACP program that UNEP is coordinating. The Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific program that supports multilateral environmental agreements within the three regions is supported by European Union, where UNEP serves as the coordinating agency and implementing body. And this is the third phase of the project, which runs between 2020 and 2024. The main objective of the project is to work with countries in the ACP region, Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific region, to enhance support for countries to comply and enforce various multilateral environmental agreements that deal with both biodiversity, chemicals, pollution, waste, as well as support countries in the region on issues related to environmental governance in general, ocean governance in particular. We have a third component of the project that deals with mainstreaming agriculture and biodiversity, and that component of the program is implemented and coordinated by colleagues from FAO. So given the nature of this project that supports both implementation and enforcement of agreements, work streams under this particular program is to work with countries, is to support countries, is to help countries and regions in preparation for various scientific body and governing body meetings of various MEAs. So in line with that, we are extremely privileged and happy to continue our collaboration between UNEP and CARICOM Secretariat in implementing this phase of the project. We have discussed in preparation for the meeting. We have Dr. Hezekiah Benitez, the Chair of SBSTTA 24, who will be providing us background to the informal session, and also Dr. Alexander Sastakov from the CBD Secretariat, also providing details related to the session. The main purpose of this particular briefing is to help countries, is to help the focal points who are participating in these informal sessions, which are in preparation for the formal meeting of SBSTTA 24 that will be held fairly soon. We'll hear more details of the agenda. We'll hear more details of the technical discussions that are expected to happen in the run-up to SBSTTA 24, during SBSTTA 24. And as many of you are aware, the outcomes of the SBSTTA meeting in the form of recommendations are what are going to be presented for negotiations and for decision making at the forthcoming CBD COP 15 meeting that is expected to be convened in 2021. So the agenda that we have set ourselves for today is to have some welcome remarks from our colleagues, the Assistant Secretary General from CARICOM Secretariat. Then we'll also request the Honorable Deputy Premier from Bermuda if he would like to make some special remarks. And then we'll hear from Ms. Helena Brown, the Bureau member representing the region in the SBSTTA Bureau, followed by a brief overview of the agenda for SBSTTA 24 and also the related planning for the informal session from the Chair of SBSTTA and the Secretary of SBSTTA, followed by a short technical presentation from UNEP that outlines and elaborates the agenda that is being set for SBSTTA 24. And this will be followed by a facilitated discussion, and then we will actually close the session identifying some follow-up actions that can be in support of the region as well as countries in the region. So once again, thank you very much to all of you for joining this session. And this actually is the first in a series of such meetings that we intend to organize in support of countries in the Caribbean region to effectively participate in various both scientific meetings and the decision-making COP meetings of CBD as well as other biodiversity, chemicals, and waste-related conventions. So with that, I'd like to pass the floor to our colleagues from CARICOM Secretariat to provide some welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pisupati. My name is Douglas Slater, Assistant Secretary General, Human and Social Development of the CARICOM Secretariat, under which this item falls. I wish to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Premier of Bermuda, the representatives of the government of the Caribbean community, representatives of the governments of St. Lucia and Antigua and Barbuda in their roles as members of the GRULAC and members of the Conference of Parties, the Bureau for the Convention of Biological Diversity, representing the SBSTTA Bureau. Also, representatives of the Convention on Biological Diversity Secretariat, reps of the United Nations Environment Programme, reps of CARICOM regional organizations, representatives of our civil society groups, CARICOM Secretariat colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Secretary General, Ambassador in Laura, let me start by wishing you all a very healthy and productive 2021, despite the trying circumstances that we find ourselves in as a region and as a global community. On behalf of the CARICOM, let me welcome everyone to this briefing session that is being facilitated by our partnering agency, UNEP, led by Dr. Balakrishna Pisupati and his team. We welcome the opportunity to have as many persons, national agencies, entities, including non-governmental organizations, youth, and the private sector sensitized about the overall issues that will be discussed during the 24th session of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Subsidiary Body on Scientific, Technical, and Technological Advice, the CBD SBSTTA-24 meeting. As the experts are aware, the Bureau of the Subsidiary Body on Scientific, Technical, and Technological Advice will hold a 6th informal session of the subsidiary body from February the 17th, 2021. During this meeting, the draft post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will be discussed ahead of final adoption during COP 15. The Caribbean community as a political grouping continues to remain engaged and provide interventions on the region's position in order to negotiate the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, ensuring that the concerns and challenges of CARICOM small island developing states are placed on the agenda, are lobbied. In order for this to happen, it is especially essential for the region's negotiators, policy advisors, decision makers, and other multi-sectoral groups to be well informed of all issues that will be discussed during this meeting of the SBSTTA 24. The briefing today provides an opportunity to enhance our understanding of key issues relevant for the region, to strengthen our regional network of biodiversity management, promote better regional preparations for the SBSTTA 24, the subsidiary body and implementation, SBI, and other CDB 15 meetings, and to obtain inputs from a wide spectrum of Caribbean stakeholders. The CARICOM Secretariat is heartened and grateful for the leadership and interventions of our member states and lead negotiators during these processes, and thank UNEP for their facilitations through the EU ACP MEAs project to organize this platform in support to the region. The CARICOM community promotes the importance of stakeholder engagement and support for ensuring broad understanding of our diversity is used to help the region in making informed decisions in key international meetings. I therefore wish to thank you for your attendance and participation, and we hope this session will provide a much needed impetus to prepare national engagements and communication strategies ahead of the COP. While acknowledging that these are trying times for the region, we cannot help but reflect on the words of the Prime Minister of Barbados, Honorable Mia Mottley, as she opened the 22nd Forum of Ministers of Environment of Latin America and the Caribbean on February the 1st, 2021. In her address, she noted that, quote, environmental challenges traveled across boundaries and brought nations together if allowed. She emphasized though that the political will must be present for that to happen, unquote. She indicated that the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda has been compromised by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is for that reason we need to have a collaborative and coordinated approach on all that we do. The CARICOM Secretariat believes that this is indeed the case as we do the important work to advance the Global Biodiversity Framework and to carve a niche for Caribbean SIDS in this landscape. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for your usual engagement, enthusiasm, and support, and I wish all of us an informative and engaging session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas Slater. Thank you very much for your welcome and opening remarks. And certainly we value the collaboration with CARICOM Secretariat, colleagues who actually are managing this project. It's a very inspiring leadership that you and colleagues at the senior management in CARICOM Secretariat are providing to us to lead the implementation of the project in the region. And certainly your remarks will resonate as we are discussing the agenda and the follow-up discussions after that. Thank you very much for your time and for your interest for joining this meeting. May I now request Ms. Helena Brown, the Bureau member from GRULAC, to provide some remarks. Helena, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable Walter Robin, the Deputy Premier of Bermuda, Dr. Douglas Slater, Assistant Secretary General of the CARICOM Secretariat, Dr. Balaka Krishna, Pisupati UNEP, Dr. Hezekiel Benitez, SAPSA Chair, and Dr. Alexander Shestakov, SAPSA Secretariat, Dr. Spencer Thomas, Ambassador Special Envoy to MEAs, Government of Grenada, Dr. Amrika Singh and Ms. Tisha John Baptist of the CARICOM Secretariat, colleagues, friends. It is indeed a pleasure to be here and to be part of this meeting today. We, as the Caribbean region, have collaborated on many occasions with CARICOM and OECS in the past to build the capacity of our negotiators with respect to biodiversity, the technical aspects of biodiversity, the SAPSTA agenda items of the Convention of Biological Diversity. We have just come off the SAPSTA briefing sessions facilitated by the Secretariat of the Convention, providing us refreshers on the key elements of the SAPSTA agenda items. Having UNEP convene this meeting now can only improve the process of strengthening the capacity of our Caribbean negotiators. Just to note, this process is essential because SIDS have extremely vulnerable ecosystems and economies, and it's important that we are vocal in the upcoming discussions, especially as it relates to the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. SIDS, Caribbean SIDS, other SIDS, our survival depends on having robust biodiversity, strong ecosystems. So therefore, having our voice at all the tables, at all the meetings, at all the COPs is important, that we are heard because our survival depends on it. As SIDS, I would like to thank, and as part of the Caribbean, I would like to thank, and as part of GRULAC, I would like to thank UNEP for this opportunity. And I hope this meeting is successful and that we'll be able to participate more effectively in the upcoming meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Helena Brown. We really appreciate your participation because to an extent you represent the voice of the region sitting in the Bureau of SAPSTA. So thank you very much for joining us. And may I now give the floor to Dr. Hezekiah Benitez, the chair of SAPSTA 24, for his remarks as well as outlining the plans for the informal SAPSTA 24 session that is being organized by the Convention Secretariat. Dr. Hezekiah, you have the floor.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Hezekiah. Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning, Excellencies. Helena Brown, member of the Bureau of SAPSTA, colleagues from UNEP and CBD Secretariat, and participants in general. It's an honor to participate in this CARICOM session to provide you with information on SAPSTA 24 preparations, and in particular for the informal sessions that are starting next week to enhance the GRULAC and in particular the Caribbean region preparation for these important meetings. Let me start very briefly to inform you that SAPSTA 24 has a number of substantive issues that is going to be dealing as a response to different decisions from the Conference of the Parties, and in particular from the second meeting of the open-ended working group on preparations for the post-2020 Global Framework on Biodiversity. In particular, we're going to be dealing with the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework for the monitoring purposes, followed by synthetic biology, risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms. We're also going to deal with marine and coastal biodiversity, biodiversity and agriculture, the program of work of IPBES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, Biodiversity and Health, and invasive species. So it's a load agenda with a number of documents, which most of them are already published in the website of the convention. That is part of the links and information for this meeting. I know later UNEP is going to provide a more detailed presentation of the various documents. As you probably know, last 2 weeks also we had briefing sessions where, together with the Secretariat, we have a short presentation of the documents and the content without going to any kind of negotiation, but to familiarize participants with the documents. There are some agenda items that include 3 or 4 documents on either on pre-session documents with some addendums or information documents to support the information behind. So I invite you to take a look on the website for the various documents, and there is also a link where you can see for every day, because we did it in 2 time zones at the same day. So it was a total of 6 briefing sessions where you can see the PowerPoint presentations elaborated by Secretariat, and also the recording if you want to listen to the various questions that participants ask to clarify, as I said, the documents, the content in particular. Now we're starting a new phase with the informal sessions. There is also a scenario note published in the website where you can also take a look. And these sessions the focus is to include statements to equivalent to the first reading in a physical meeting for every document. So we're going to have also 6 days to cover this phase on the informal meetings. We're starting on February 17 on Wednesday with post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that will continue the next day. This is a very important issue, and followed by synthetic biology, and then on Friday, risk assessment and risk management on living modified organisms. Then we're going to have a break for the weekend and also 2 days of UNEP 5 meeting. Then we will reconvene on Wednesday, February 24th with marine and coastal biodiversity, which is a very important item for the Caribbean region, and continue on next Thursday 25 on biodiversity and agriculture and invasive species, and finishing on Friday the 26th with IPBES and program of work or any remaining points. What is important is to listen to parties' reactions to the document. So all the statements are going to be recorded, and also written submissions will be published. Together with the Secretariat, my intention is to prepare a very short procedural report of the informal session, and it's important that we're talking about an informal session that will not lead to negotiations or preparations for any CRP document yet. We're going to do that when we have a formal session later, but we're going to save a lot of time to listen to positions from parties to the various documents. So it's going to be very important to be registered in the list of participants for the meeting. All sessions will last 3 hours per day. So we are making some improvements because it's going to be translation to all languages of the UN from 7 to 10 a.m. Montreal time, with a 15-minute break approximately at the middle of every session. So we're now moving from 2-hour sessions to 3-hour sessions with a break, but including interpretations to the 6 languages. All requests for the floor by parties will be heard on each agenda item during these informal meetings, and statements by stakeholder groups will also be heard, as well as other observers as time allows. There will be a short opening session, which includes short statements, and we're going to move directly to the matter with no keynote presentations. We are leaving keynote presentations when we have a formal meeting later. Each agenda item will start with regional and group statements after the introduction by the Secretariat. it's important to know that there will be no regional group statements at the opening of the meeting. This is the practice in SBSTTA, but it will be open in every document. If the region wishes to give a regional presentation, then they will have about 5 minutes in this case, but all other presentations of individual parties and observers are limited to 3 minutes only. So I invite you to make your preparations for your interventions, really respecting the time. We have very limited time to a very ambitious agenda. So I count with your cooperation in this matter. If you want to provide additional information, you can do it, and that information will be also published. But I invite you to make it very consistent with your statements and to keep on in time, not exceeding the 3 minutes presentation. That's going to be very helpful to have a clear idea where the majority of parties and observers are in their opinions to the various documents. It's also going to be regular meetings of the Bureau and also the regional meetings. I know the GRULAC region is also scheduling a particular meeting for regional consultations before these informal meetings. The individual sessions on the agenda items will be chaired by myself at the beginning, at the end, and with the support of members of the SBSTTA Bureau, including Helena, to facilitate and to don't see the same face all 6 days, but to give a more dynamic fashion to our informal meetings in SBSTTA. So I hope it will be a very productive meeting to make progress. So parties can, when we have the formal meeting, make reference to previous statements so we can save time and to have the best information for our deliberations also in the formal meeting. It will be very useful to indicate, for example, on agenda item 3, to cover elements on the pre-session documents like on recommendations or the nature of headline indicators, or the establishment of the expert group of indicators. I'm referring in particular to agenda item 3, or next steps in the monitoring framework, the organization of this framework or criteria of indicators, and overall organization of addendum, document addendum 2 that recently was published to help to analyze goals and targets. As you know, SBSTTA as a scientific and technical body do not have the mandate to negotiate goals and targets of the draft 0, but we've been asked to work on this scientific and technical elements for indicators, headline indicators, baselines, and also to give advice on goals and targets, but not to negotiate them. That will be the role of the third meeting of the open-ended working group for the framework with the guidance of the co-chairs, Basil and Francis from Canada and Uganda. All statements will be made public, and also I advise you to try to avoid repetition in statements on behalf of regions when you make your intervention as an individual party. I hope this information is useful to have a clear idea of how we're planning to manage these informal meetings for preparation of SBSTTA 24. This is adaptive management of the circumstances we're living in, the impossibility to have a face-to-face meeting that I hope someday we can do it with all of you. With this, I leave my remarks, and I ask my colleague Sasha Shestakov from CBD Secretariat if he want to add something that I probably missed. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Hesekio. Dr. Alexander Shashkatev from the CBD Secretariat. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Balakrishna, and thanks a lot for inviting us. We're always happy to work closely with our colleagues, and thank you for support from CARICOM and from UNEP to further build capacity and support CBD parties in being fully engaged into CBD processes. I probably will just reiterate few points SBSTTA chair made just now. Of course, first of all, the nature of the meeting. So that's probably unusual for us, the first time when we have a informal session of SBSTTA. That means that we do not have any negotiations during this session, as well as there is no official documents or outcomes. And as also chair mentioned, no CRP documents. So it's basically limited to the initial statements, what usually at the physical meetings we call first reading of documents. So it's your statements. So the second important piece is that we definitely encourage you to register for the meeting in case that some of Caribbean parties didn't do it yet. That's really important that we have all registrations within next 2-3 days. And also please submit us at least a day before the meeting your statements in a written form, because that will help very much interpreters to work well and properly during the session, where of course interpreters, they have some extra challenges working online. Also, as mentioned already, those statements will be publicly available. I also like to stress that if any of you envisage some major technical issues during the meeting, and you can see some serious connectivity problems, we also invite you to send us in advance of the meeting your pre-recorded video statements. And in case you really experience a problem after you ask a floor at the meeting, then actually we, as a backup, we can go and play this pre-recorded video. So Iseki also mentioned the opportunity for regional meetings, and we definitely like to invite you to be actively engaged also through the bureau members from the region, both Helena and also Adams from San Lucia. So also please use materials from webinars last 2 weeks. They're all available online on the website, both PowerPoint presentations articulating all specific details of each document for the meeting, but also you may wish to listen recordings, which also may help probably to address some of questions you may have. Also, please don't hesitate to come to us in the following days if you have any further questions. As Iseki stressed, this meeting is not just on post-2020. It has many other important elements in the agenda, also to be discussed, and some decisions to be made at COP15. Although most of those agenda items, or probably better to say all of them, are definitely linked to post-2020 as well. So I probably stop here, and as we have time later at the session, we'll be also happy to address any of your questions in relation to participating in this meeting, and looking forward to see many of you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you very much. Both those presentations from the chair and the secretary, I'm sure is quite helpful for us to, orchestrate our thoughts and our preparations for the forthcoming meeting. At this point, I'd like to formally recognize Honorable Walter H. Robin, the Deputy Premier from Bermuda, who has joined us. Welcome, Your Excellency, for this briefing session. And I'd like to invite you to make a few remarks. Thank you very much for joining, and we really appreciate your time and interest.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to join with the Bermuda delegation. We, like many other countries, are concerned with the preservation of biodiversity across the globe, particularly around small island jurisdictions. And we're happy to be a part of this brief informal discussion to forward that cause with clearly environmental and biodiversity and environmental protection issues, along with climate, are at the top of the global agenda. And it's important that certainly smaller island groups are sitting at the table of the discussion, because we are the first line of impact when it comes to the ravages of reactions to the evolving climate across the globe. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. Bermuda is committed to working with all global partners with advancing progress and the preservation of global biodiversity. So thank you for your time and opportunity to be on this web conference.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think your words are very encouraging, and we certainly hope that you will continue to engage with us during this meeting as well as after, to ensure the voice of the island states are appropriately heard. So with that, we will move on to a short presentation as both Dr. Hesekio and Alexander Shestakov mentioned, that you can actually view a full detailed webinar presentations on each of the agenda items on the CBD website. But for the purposes of this meeting and to support some discussions as a part of the preparations for the informal meeting, UNEP, we actually have put together a short presentation that identifies the key agenda items that are going to be discussed with a little bit more of a detail. And as I make the presentation, I'll also mention on the preparatory events that were held in CARICOM before this particular event during May 2020, and some issues that were identified as priorities for CARICOM. So thank you, Ladu, for projecting the slides. So can we have the next slide, please? You already heard from the chair of SBSTTA that this particular SBSTTA has some significantly important agenda items, the most important being the discussions related to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I'm sure almost all of us who are involved in the preparations and in the process of contributing to the future of biodiversity would have had an opportunity to look at the draft post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that is available with us. So there will be discussions related to this agenda item. We also will be discussing an important element, an important issue that was identified years ago as an emerging issue, focusing on synthetic biology. There will be discussion on risk assessment, risk management of living modified organisms, discussions on marine and coastal biodiversity, which I recognize is going to be extremely important for colleagues in the Caribbean region, biodiversity agriculture, biodiversity health, the program of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity Ecosystem Services, and invasive alien species, which again a very, very important agenda for countries in the Caribbean region. The next slide, please. So in terms of the discussions on the post-2020 framework, the Global Biodiversity Framework draft, the informal meeting as well as SBSTTA would look at the points that are highlighted on the slide there, that carry out a scientific and technical review of the updated goals and targets, as you know, based on the outcomes of the second open working group, and the related indicators and baselines of the draft Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as the revised appendices to the framework, and to provide advice to the working group in its third meeting. So essentially, this is going to be a very, very important discussion, especially coming from the scientific body that looks at technical and technological issues related to biodiversity. So certainly, it's going to be an important element of the discussion that will happen. There will also be a focus on reviewing analysis of the linkages between the proposed goals under the Global Biodiversity Framework, the targets, as well as reviewing the monitoring framework of the Biodiversity Framework in relation to linking up with the Sustainable Development Goals that are within the scope of the convention. As many of you are aware, and a lot of discussions that we've been having in the last several months, including the outcomes of the UN Secretary General's convened the Nature Summit. A lot of discussions are emanating in terms of looking at biodiversity and nature conservation in the context of countries achieving the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So that will be a substantive element of focus during this particular SBSTTA meeting. And there will also be a discussion on a range of relevant and existing indicators, baseline dates, and other appropriate methods for monitoring the methods for monitoring biodiversity, identifying the gaps in indicators, and also options for filling the gaps, and for suggesting or contributing to a monitoring framework for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So to an extent, these are kind of cluster of very important elements that are going to be discussed during the SBSTTA meeting. And I also recognize that using the CARICOM webinar series that were convened, a series of 5 webinars were convened by CARICOM Secretariat earlier last year, some priorities were identified that directly speak to some of those elements that are going to be discussed during both the informal SBSTTA as well as the formal SBSTTA meeting as and when it gets convened. The first one being the linkages to the national and regional priorities as they were identified within the national biodiversity strategies and action plans. And certainly these documents are guideposts for several of the countries or all of the countries who are parties to the convention in terms of putting together priorities and identifying actions to achieve the different biodiversity goals and targets. There are also an interest to develop regional and country specific indicators, and certainly that's where the discussion that will happen during the SBSTTA will be very, very critical in terms of looking at the current indicators, the usefulness of the indicators, the gaps, and also suggestive indicators that can fill the gaps. There is also an interest to look at regional implementation options for marine and coastal management, including in spatial planning, and this also directly speaks or relates to the agenda item on marine and coastal biodiversity, which is going to be extremely important for the region. And lastly and importantly, related to the discussions both in terms of linking biodiversity for sustainable development, there were interests from the CARICOM in terms of linking the biodiversity discussions with issues of blue economy and ocean governance. The next slide. So considering some of these interests and considering the agenda for SBSTTA, some additional considerations that we can possibly indicate for our discussions today will be to focus on issues of inclusive approach to island biodiversity, enhancing efficiency of implementation, monitoring implementation, realizing the commitments that countries have already made towards achieving the biodiversity goals and targets, but are continue to make through various platforms, both technical, financial, and political commitments, and to look at national and regional programs for capacity building, awareness raising, and knowledge management. Certainly this is identified as a cross-cutting issue across the different components that were discussed as a part of the CARICOM webinar series also earlier last year. The next slide. Looking at synthetic biology, this is certainly a very, very important element of discussion at SBSTTA. Many of you are aware of the technological developments that are happening, where synthetic biology is seen as the next iteration or the progressive evolution from biotechnology in terms of its application. And now billions of dollars are being invested in developing this technology, applying elements of this technology. But certainly within the process of the convention, countries have identified the need for looking at how this technology need to be viewed, how the technology could impact the 3 objectives of the convention, namely conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use, and also issues of access and benefit sharing. So in that context, the discussions under SBSTTA 24 would focus on the outcomes of several intersessional activities that were held to further understand the implications of this particular technological intervention that focuses on the review of new technological development so far, links with issues like impacts of the technology on the lives and livelihoods and opportunities for indigenous people and local communities, dealing with exceptions. Are there any exceptions to this technology in terms of the products and organisms that are being developed? Looking at establishing a broad and a regular horizon scanning and also looking at monitoring and assessment. This particular agenda is something which is going to receive a lot of attention, and we do have a very detailed information document that the Secretariat had compiled based on the inputs received from online discussion as well as the discussions under the ad hoc technical expert group. So COP15 would hear the recommendations from SBSTTA, where should CBD consider synthetic biology as an emerging issue or otherwise. And of course, it will also provide some recommendations in support of the work of the multidisciplinary technical expert group, and also suggest that both the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety as well as the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing that do have very direct links to the developments within the area of synthetic biology would have, so that people who actually are negotiating, people who are looking at the implementation of the two protocols under the convention would take note of the emerging issues that are being discussed within synthetic biology. And of course, one very clear message or recommendation that had come from the webinar series earlier for CARICOM has been that the region is very interested to look at what the dimensions of this technology are, but at the same time would also like to use the appropriate principles and appropriate approaches to deal with having a balanced approach, so that it doesn't become too over-regulatory in terms of the opportunities that such technology can provide for the region. The next slide. In terms of risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms, of course, as you all know, there will be focus on the emerging experiences on both risk assessment management with respect to LMOs, which is the key of the Cartagena Protocol related discussion. But the SBSTTA would also discuss the outcomes of various online discussions and the meetings of the ad hoc technical expert group. But of course, the SBSTTA would also focus on three very specific elements in the context of risk assessment and risk management. One that focuses on the issue related to engineered gene drives. And again, this agenda would also link up with our discussions on synthetic biology, because that technically is also related to some elements of the discussions on engineered gene drives. There will also be a focus on dealing with the issues of living modified organisms, fish that are genetically modified, and also a review of the 4th national reports of the Cartagena Protocol on the needs of countries in terms of the emerging needs, capacities and others to deal with risk assessment of the living modified organisms. And as I mentioned, that the webinar series of the Caribbean region in the past seem to have discussed a lot of issues on how to appropriately use the technology, but at the same time ensure that they do not run counter to the objectives of the convention, but also look at building necessary capacities and awareness of different stakeholders on some of these issues. The next slide, please. The next substantive agenda item, which I'm sure is going to be of an immense interest to the Caribbean region, is on marine and coastal biodiversity. As you know, enormous amount of work has gone in, and thanks to colleagues at the Secretariat who have pulled together a large amount of information, technical and scientific, and also assessment of different elements that actually have impacted our ability to deal with marine and coastal biodiversity during the intersessional period. And of course, the key issues that are going to be discussed within this particular agenda deals with options for modifying the description of ecologically or biologically significant marine areas, for describing new areas, and for strengthening the scientific credibility and transparency of this process. And this actually resonates with a lot of work that also is being or is to be undertaken as a part of the ongoing collaboration that UNEP, CARICOM, the Cartagena Convention, and other regional seas convention and in terms of dealing with marine and coastal biodiversity. SBSTTA would also hear the technical interventions and the progress that has been made in terms of issues related to marine debris, marine litter and microplastics. Also would look at the anthropogenic underwater noise and marine spatial planning issues. Would also like to focus on mainstreaming biodiversity in fisheries with the support of FAO and colleagues who have been focusing on this. Consider the experiences of issues related to marine spatial planning, progress in dealing with Aichi target number 10 on coral reefs and associated ecosystems, and also consider voluntary work plans on biodiversity in cold water areas within the scope of the convention. So certainly some of those agenda items are particularly relevant for the discussions and for the current and ongoing plans of countries within the Caribbean, both at national and regional level, in terms of identifying opportunities and maintaining and supporting, promoting coastal and marine biodiversity issues. So what is expected from the SBSTTA outcomes is to conduct a strategic review. And these are the expected recommendations that are expected to come out of the discussions. Is to conduct a strategic review and analysis of the program of work on marine and coastal biodiversity in the context of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, develop voluntary guidelines on peer review process for identifying of areas meeting the EPSA criteria, the ecologically and biologically sensitive area criteria, and other relevant compatible and complementary scientific criteria. And for those of us who are working on this issue, we are familiar with the amount of experience countries have gained in terms of already implementing enormous amounts of work related to EPSA and its implementation. There's also a recommendation that is expected to come out to develop a strategic review and analysis of the program of work on island biodiversity in the context of implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And this, as mentioned, including by the Assistant Secretary General of CARICOM Secretariat and also the Honorable Deputy Premier of Bermuda, is very, very important for the region because of the nature of ecosystems and the importance of the biodiversity that countries in the Caribbean region have, but also the kinds of challenges and the kinds of pressures these ecosystems currently are facing. So inputs into this particular agenda item is something which is going to be extremely important and relevant for the Caribbean region. The next slide. Biodiversity agriculture, of course, the focus of this agenda under the SBSTTA deals with the issue of soil biodiversity. Many of us are aware of enormous work that is already being undertaken by colleagues from the UNFAO. So we will be looking at the outcomes of the work done by UNFAO in terms of soil biodiversity, as well as looking at an updated draft plan of action for an international initiative for conservation and sustainable use of soil biodiversity. And of course, the considerations for Caribbean is that, which is also identified as an important element in the background document prepared by the Secretariat, is that in the Latin and the Caribbean regions, the national instruments on agriculture or biodiversity policy often include sustainable management of soils in a broad sense. However, few consider the regulation, conservation, and sustainable use of soil biodiversity. So that is something important for us to consider, and also to input into the plan of action in the context of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Next slide is on health and biodiversity. That will be the next agenda item that looks at integrated science-based indicators. And this agenda is particularly important in the context of the current pandemic that we are all being impacted with and by, to look at the science-based indicators, metrics, and others, to focus on approaches related to mainstreaming biodiversity for health, and focus on a draft global action plan for mainstreaming biodiversity and health linkages. So, of course, the considerations for Caribbean, which actually is an extract from the background documentation, looks at focus on One Health approach that looks at human, animal, and environmental health as one overall element to deal with health. Integrated issues of biodiversity and health, national and regional recovery plans. Many of the countries are looking at recovery plans for COVID, so you look at the focus approach on biodiversity and health, and to identify options for integrating health and biodiversity issues within actions in realizing the SDGs. The other agenda will be on invasive alien species. Again, a very, very important agenda for the Caribbean region. The next slide, Ladu. Would be on invasive alien species, where the discussions would be to consider the outcomes of the ad hoc technical expert group meeting on invasive alien species, but also to consider the work that is currently being undertaken under the Economic and Social Council's subcommittee of experts on transport of dangerous goods, and also looking at how guidance can be provided while updating and implementing the NBSAPs. So certainly the elements are very, very relevant to the region, looking at globally harmonized labeling system, which is going to be a part of the discussion, integrating elements of work under the interagency group that focuses on invasive species, and most importantly, managing cross-border trade through e-commerce. So these are some of the critical agenda items that are going to be discussed at Substa. And the next slide, please. So given the nature of the issues that are in front of us, and considering some of the priorities that are going to be relevant for the region, so 3 issues that we should have in mind as and when we go to a short time discussion as a part of this meeting would be to look at how can Caribbean region prioritize the issues, what inputs can the region and countries within can make towards Substa 24, and how can the region prepare for implementing the post-2020 framework as and when it gets adopted and decided upon at CBD COP 15. So with that, I'll sort of end my presentation. And then may I request Dr. Spencer Thomas, who I'm sure all of you have known him for many years, a very, very experienced person dealing with CBD issues for many years, and also was a Substa chair previously. So I'd really appreciate if Dr. Spencer Thomas can take over and then organize the discussion and the question and answer session. Dr. Spencer Thomas, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bala, and good day to everyone. I think I could say good morning to most of us, and good afternoon and maybe good evening to some of us. But thank you very much for your invitation to be here. I know we have only 20 minutes, and thank you, Dr. Bala, for your exquisite timing, because we are back on time, and I know we have 20 minutes. You have posed some very important questions here. I think the stage has been set for us to respond to those questions that you just posed for us. We heard very clearly what the 8 key agenda items are. Of course, the key agenda items for the Substa. And thanks to the CARICOM webinar series, a lot of work has been done on this, and several of the priority areas for the Caribbean has come forward. And I want to take us back to the Secretary General, who spoke very clearly, the Assistant Secretary General, who spoke very clearly on the issues and concerns facing our region and on our challenges and the issues that we will have to face as we go forward in this situation. We are in a different situation now with a virtual session. So I think we will have to spend some time, as you indicated, on how do we maximize our presence and our leadership in terms of our impact on the session to come. So I would like to open the floor. I think your questions that you raised could remain on the slide. So could you put back your last slide? I think we can ask that your last slide be placed so that it might be able to help and guide the discussion. The question is how. The question is the inputs that you will want to put in, and how do you prepare for implementation? We heard very clearly already that implementation is critical. Implementation at the regional level, implementation at the national level, implementation at the local level. We heard also about the use of innovative mechanisms, connectivity with other agenda items like the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and so on. The necessity for adequate financial support, and to look at the nexus approaches to biodiversity conservation. So can we open the floor for comments, for any issues and on the questions that have been posed? We have how can the Caribbean region prioritize the issues, and what inputs can the region and countries make within the Substa? So can we open the floor for any comments on those 2 questions?
Yeah, colleagues, if you can raise your hand.
Yes.
I'll help Dr. Spencer Thomas to identify, but feel free to take the floor and provide your comments.
I will take it that we all, as we wait on the hands to show, I will take it that we all are in agreement with the priorities based on the agenda items on the priorities for the region that came out of the webinar series. We are all aware of those priorities, and we take it that these will be our priorities, that we will look at the linkages on the national level with your NBSAP. The indicators development will be a very critical one. The alignment issues with the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation, regional implementation. These are some of the things that came out. The blue economy, again, and several of those are on the agenda. Biodiversity and health, biodiversity and agriculture, and so on. So any questions? Any issues? How do we maximize our presence at this virtual forum? How do we ensure that the Caribbean's voice is at the top?
Yeah. Yes, I see Samrika Singh from CARICOM Secretariat.
Hi, thank you, Bala. Thank you, Ambassador. Good morning to all. Good evening and good afternoon, wherever you all are. Just to say, while everyone gathers their thoughts. So we're looking at the multiple crises that are facing our region. We have the climate crisis, we have the COVID crisis, we have the economic crisis, and I believe the less spoken about crisis will be global the threat to ecosystems and global biodiversity loss. And I think as we articulate this new global biodiversity framework, we have an opportunity. It's an excellent opportunity to try to bring targeted and more focused attention and action on biodiversity loss, which is, a challenge for our region, which is very vulnerable in several aspects, be it environmental and due to its geographical location, but also due to social and economic issues. So there are a number of opportunities that seem to be coalescing that I think will require new approaches and paradigm shift from this region. It will require us to be more integrated in our approaches and thinking. We mentioned two important existing frameworks. We mentioned the SDGs, we mentioned Paris. I would also like to add for your consideration the Sendai framework on disaster risk reduction, the Samoa pathway, which is its program of action, as well as the Addis Ababa action plan on financing for sustainable development. And those together with the revised Global Biodiversity Framework will give some sort of foundation for international visioning and progress towards attacking these multiple crises that are facing us. But within those frameworks, we have to always keep in our mind that as small island and low-lying coastal developing states, we have special circumstances that always make it a little bit tougher for us because of our size, because of our distance from markets, because we're located in a very active seismic zone in a hurricane belt. There are things that will always compound these threats that are impacting us. So I think it's an opportunity. We have to look at this as an opportunity for those of us who are involved in biodiversity management to bring it more closely, integrate it more fully into the various programs of action. We're about to start, or we have started, the decade of ocean science, the decade of ecosystem restoration. It just signals that a number of things are lining up. And going into the finalization of the biodiversity framework as SIDS, we have to figure out how we can't do everything. We don't have the capacity, but how are we going to direct our interventions and our actions so that we can address these multiple crises that are facing us. So I just wanted to throw that out, you know, to probably start the ball rolling and to get some thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you very much, America, for this, and thank you very much for bringing back the issues that we are actually facing multiple crises at the same time, and we have to handle it. And thank you for bringing back the whole question of the whole slew of the 2015 global agreements, all 5 of them, including the 2014 one from Samoa. All of them are germane to this discussion. The special circumstances of CARICOM countries, small island developing states, of course, and that the opportunities are available that we need to look at also. So I mean, it is really great that the UNEP and CARICOM have collaborated on this particular issue, because it's very important for us to have a voice as moving into the meeting, albeit at a different way because of the virtual nature of the meeting. So I think it is even more important that we have this discussion here today, which set the stage and we basically could amplify our work at that particular meeting. So if I see no questions here, I will ask a specific question. Is there any red line that we are aware of that the CARICOM countries must be able to defend at this meeting? Anybody see anything real coming out of the preparatory meeting so far that we need to coalesce around? Are there any points or any key concerns that we may have at the moment that we will have to ensure that we have a unified voice on? Anything of that nature? Can we throw it out?
I see Grenada Environment Division's hand is up.
Yes, Grenada, Aria?
Thank you very much. Yes. Good morning, good day, good evening to all. Let me just, on behalf of Grenada, give thanks to UNEP, Dr. Bela and his team, to the hardworking CBD Secretariat representatives, and to the CARICOM Secretariat, to Dr. Helena and Mr. Adams as our Bureau reps. We extend grateful thanks to you for the huge amount of hard work that has resulted in the convening of today's meeting and all the preparatory work leading up to it. I took the floor not specifically to address the burning question that Ambassador, you very rightly raised, but just to first highlight the fact that island biodiversity and the work program for island biodiversity was well supported from 2000 up to 2020. And I am concerned about not seeing already crystallized within the post-2020 biodiversity framework, the space to continue an island biodiversity work program. I'm seeing elements sort of coming up in very specific ways, but we had clear justification, which allowed for us to move forward between 2000 and 2020, and the support between 2010 and 2020 to focus on the island biodiversity work program, and it's an important one. We also had the program of work on protected areas, so we had a number of areas, but I think that there's clear justification for us to move forward with the island biodiversity work program, and I don't see the space being created for that as a clear package. So I wanted to put that out to other colleagues for discussion. And this would feed very much into how we are thinking about implementation. I really appreciate the opportunities that we've had leading up to the informal substance that will take place to articulate that having spent so much time to develop our NBSAPs, to look at targets, to look at indicators, we didn't want to start from scratch. And this has been well picked up, I think, within the current post-biodiversity framework. And this substa coming up will be key for us, again, to make sure that our indicators are on the table. I know that having had caucus with the Pacific, that the Pacific SIDS have championed a focus on oceans. This is of relevance to us as Atlantic SIDS as well. We are now recognized as not just being small island developing states and small island states, but also large ocean states. And in keeping with the emphasis on blue economy, we want to make sure that it is sustainable. So I already see and think that we should be familiarizing ourselves and becoming comfortable with what has been identified and championed by our colleagues in the Pacific SIDS. We had an opportunity in Italy to hear a little bit more because it was tabled at that time, but I want to put that on the table, that this is something that I think that we should also consider. And at this point, our discussions have centered around the synthetic biology, the LMOs, coastal and marine, all of which are important. But I just want to highlight here that oceans also is very important to us. It's already being championed by the Pacific SIDS, and I think we should consider how we want to give it support and elevate whatever we want as priorities within that context. The final thing that I want to say to answer very quickly the question that Ambassador Spencer has placed on the table for us is that Grenada remains extremely concerned about the synthetic biology issues and in particular digital sequence information. In the past, Mr. Daniel Lewis and myself have worked as part of the Caribbean caucus and the team when we were splitting up duties and responsibilities. And again, we are happy to give some support again to this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Aria, for this presentation. And of course, I think it is important that you raise a very important matter, collaboration with other SIDS and basically having a SIDS platform as we move forward. It's a very important aspect. The question of the issues of synthetic biology and digital sensing is an issue that you have raised. The question of the program of work, though, the issue, though, I think is we have to find a way, in my view, to integrate our priorities in island biodiversity, in all the other programs within the context of the agenda that we have before us. Because right now we are in a virtual session. And then there might be issues. We just heard from Suriname saying that she has some issues connecting. That may happen also at the SUBSTA meeting. So we will have, as a region, be able to back up each other and ensure that we have progress on our agenda items as we go forward. I think the region may want to also recognize how best to utilize the virtual forum to make sure that we get something very positive out of it. There were issues of having a formal virtual session. I think we have to understand how exactly we would like to ensure. We heard Shaska already indicated if there are issues, how to go around those issues. I think it is better to try as much as possible to look for solutions rather than looking to complain about this nature. Because I think we have to move forward and there is no way we can meet face to face. So we have to help each other in case any one of us will find ourselves in difficulty in internet, as already been happening on this meeting. So Bala, I think I see your hand up.
No, just more a short request to all the participants, because we realize that we have participants who actually have joined the meeting. Thank you very much, but were not registered. So there was a request from colleagues from the Secretariat asking all the participants to provide their name, affiliation, and the country so that we can record all the participants. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So again, let me thank Aria for this intervention, because it focused on some very key issues for the region and for the Caribbean and maybe for all SIDS. So can we open the floor? Any further interventions? We still have a few minutes.
Dr. Spencer, Ms. Helena has asked for the floor.
All right, Helena, Doctor.
Thank you. Yes, so I support government of Grenada in that island biodiversity framework, program framework. It's important for us to figure out how, as SIDS, we can collaborate to work together for implementation. Because as I said before, our survival depends on this working, because we depend on our ecosystem services for our survival. This is where it's at. We're not, when a storm hits us, when all of these things happen to us, there's nowhere to go. This is it. This is the plan A, and that's it, nothing else. So we have to figure out how we can work together to prioritize these. Now, means of implementation is always an issue for us. I remember with the trying to achieve the 20 targets, the ones that we were able to at least move towards meeting were ones that we had, maybe there was a project for it, or there was a way to help us manage it, whatnot. There was some backup for that. My other concern is last time we did, with working on the NBSAF, we did not get financing to help do it until maybe 5 years into it. So my concern again is, how are we going to be implementing and right away as soon as we start moving? But I think we need to strongly collaborate as SIDS to figure out how we can help each other moving on, because we have so many resources among ourselves that we can probably access. We have to investigate how that would look, what it would look like. Another issue is capacity building. Now, we have agencies, they say, okay, come, we'll build your capacity, great. But the issue is we have tiny human resources in our little offices, and we're building the capacity of one person to do 40 things, and then you get weighed down and don't get to do many things very well. We have to figure out how we can engage our NGOs, our CBOs, everyone on our islands to participate in this process. And I think that is where we could be successful in engaging the whole our country, all the people in the country, to make sure that we are working towards achieving the targets. So for the whole post-2020 GBF, I think the whole communications package will be a big deal for us, because we can't do it as the government. We can't do it as one NGO. We can only do it if we all work together, and then working together with the other countries who have similar vulnerabilities, which are the SIDS. I think that we are better able to move forward. That is what I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, a very important intervention, and many of the key issues for the region, again, have been highlighted, and means of implementation, financing issues, the communication issues, the capacity building issues, of course. So we will have to just bang ourselves together as a unit, as a group, within CARICOM, all CARICOM countries, support each other and work within the framework of the SEEDS, and to push those agenda items on this meeting, and to make sure that we get good outcomes in every agenda item. We have 8 key issues here, and I think in each one of those issues, they are very important to the region, and we need to infuse our priorities and our concerns, our challenges, looking at the long term, looking at the post-2020 framework. It's a framework, so an implementation will be critical. So I really believe that we have to make our voices heard. We have to make some very clear pronouncements at this meeting, as much as we can. I think we have to organize ourselves into that. Maybe we will have to make a few minutes to decide who will be the key spokesman and spokespersons, and who and what, and to ensure that our voice is being heard, because it is a virtual format. It is slightly different. We are not sitting face to face, so we have to also take that into consideration. How do we effectively communicate our positions in the virtual format? Any ideas on how can we be more effective on in this virtual format?
Ambassador Spencer Thomas, can I come in? Bala here.
Yes, Bala.
Okay, thank you. Certainly very valid interventions, very valid concerns, and very valid points. And of course, the biggest advantage of convening a meeting like this is that we are not in a formal setup. This is more informal, so that gives us an opportunity to be a little bit more, forward-looking, a little bit more critical, a little bit more opportunistic in the way we would like to identify some priorities. And the purpose of this meeting is exactly to do this, is that, unfortunately or fortunately, given the timelines which are before us, before we will have a formal substa that would discuss and make formal recommendations to COP15, and COP15 that will make formal decisions related to the Global Biodiversity Framework, the means of implementation, we still have some time. The biggest advantage we have with us now is that given the nature of some of these discussions that can happen virtually, where we don't have to meet physically, so we are saving a lot of not just resources but also time and our ability to maximize on the inputs that we can provide through this kind of a platform. So a couple of points, I'm throwing it in terms of eliciting some more ideas or discussions on this, is that, the biggest challenge, looking at it from a perspective of, for example, the co-chairs or from the perspective of the convention, is that coming up with the, that's what we always say in negotiations, everyone will get something, but no one will get everything. So the idea of this nature of some of these kinds of frameworks that we are discussing is that it's just too difficult, where every single priority or every single element could be reflected to the extent possible. But the advantage we have in some of these processes are how articulate, how prepared countries are in terms of identifying their priorities and trying to push their priorities to the extent possible that could be reflected in the framework. For example, there was this particular point mentioned by a colleague from Canada on the focus on Island Biodiversity Work Program until 2020, but we don't see it as much reflected as we wish in the post-2020 framework. Yes, but then can we, or can the region that includes the Pacific, that includes the Caribbean, provide some opportunity of, given the current existing draft, in what way we actually can tweak the language where we feel is relevant that could capture the priorities related to island biodiversity. I'm not saying that we should not have a full-fledged target or a full-fledged discussion on island biodiversity. I'm not mentioning that it's not a priority, but I'm only looking at, with the current framework, with the current draft that is available, what is that as countries within the region we could do in terms of identifying appropriate language that can serve the interests of the region, not just the interests, but also the priorities of the region. The second point related to that is that as and when we are discussing some of these implementation elements of it, it's going to be extremely hard, whether you are in whatever bracket, developing country, developed country, OECD country, whatever you are. It's just not possible for every country to have every possible expertise or every possible resource to implement the full-fledged elements of the GBF in whatever form it's going to be adopted. So one critical element that could possibly happen, and that's where a regional discussion like this is very important, is that, is there any way that within the region together, countries can identify that we will have certain regional approaches to implementation. We will have certain regional approaches to building capacity. We will have a particular country trying to lead on a particular issue. We will have another country trying to lead on another issue. So that individually and collectively we will be able to maximize on the investments that we are able to make. And certainly that is also related to the issue of finances. To a large extent, all the time, the general perception of looking at finances for implementation is, where is the money going to come from? But certainly it is also important that we do an exercise fairly quickly, even if it is a back of envelope calculation, is that how much of money that we currently do have on issues related to biodiversity conservation. Is there any way we can maximize, we can synergize on the ways we are investing some of those resources in terms of the implementation of the framework that we possibly are going to adopt? I'm just throwing some of these points so that you can all think about it. And the idea of this kind of a meeting that we are actually trying to organize more, not just focusing on the agenda in general, but also on specific issues if it is required or if there is a request from countries or from CARICOM, we'll be more than happy to organize some very specific sessions on this. But we are also going to be similar thing with the Pacific, and that is where the link between Pacific and link between Caribbean is also going to be an important element for UNEP to also facilitate to the extent possible. Just my personal thoughts. I thought I'll stop there. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. I don't want us to belabor this, because I see many hands. Of course, Dr. Bala made some very important points here. Let us take as many interventions as we can before the time is up. I see we have 2 more hands here, so can we take them, please? Deputy Premier, is it?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to make an intervention on this very important discussion. Just like to compliment the organizers of this video conference. When I not only got the message, but saw some of the supporting documents, I was quite intrigued and pleased by the commonality of topics that are so relevant to Bermuda's experience. But I am mindful that we are not alone in the world, even though we are far out here in the somewhat in the North Atlantic, that the experiences that we have around the issues of biodiversity and environmental protection and climate are shared. So I was excited to see so many common topics, and I totally support and endorse the comments of the 2 previous speakers of synergies. We as an island have had an experience, but I also know just from what I've been listening to, we are not alone in the challenges, particularly when it comes to things like coastal erosion and, like marine protection. You know, we have, are doing work in these areas, marine spatial planning and other key topics that I've heard spoken about. And it would be great if, for instance, there were ways that the islands of the region, and even for our friends in the Pacific and Indian Ocean and other areas, and in the South Pacific, if there are ways that we could share experiences with these particular issues, and where certain islands may have identified for themselves certain key issues and challenges, some of us may have actually designed programs that we're doing to address, and we can share that experience with them. And one thing I've been learning from my period in government over the past 10, 11 years is that there are also a number of international organizations, private foundations and institutes that are actually committed to assisting and supporting particularly small islands in some of these key areas, and where some of us have developed relationships with them. We should share the opportunities that we've had and ensure that our other islands that may not have been advanced in certain areas get an opportunity to engage with them. So I hope that we can continue these discussions as we move forward with the own regional discussions, and also the wider international discussions around these areas, because our issues are particularly unique to us. And as we are often engaged with conferences with the larger nations of the planet, sometimes our own issues get lost. So we must take every opportunity when like a weekend come together to maximize the growth of knowledge and experience, and sharing that with other island with other island communities. I look forward to those opportunities going forward over this period. So just thank you. I just want to share those thoughts, and just thank you for some of the key points that have been made by the previous speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Premier. I saw some hands are there, so can we take the floor, please? Can you take the floor?
There's Nicole.
Yes, go ahead. Is that Hyacinth? Can you take the floor? No?
Good. I know. I didn't have I typed a comment in there.
Bernal Nichols. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, please go ahead. Hello, are we having some internet issues again?
No, there was a colleague Nichols was wanting the floor, but I don't see him taking the floor.
Yeah, America maybe.
Okay. Okay, so well, I think we could try to wrap up here. I think what we have heard very clearly though is that we need to ensure that the special circumstances of small island states, especially us in the Caribbean, is featured in the framework as we go forward. I think I heard that very clearly. Island biodiversity, issues with protected areas and oceans, and all of the priorities identified already in the CARICOM webinar series needs to be front and center in the framework, and we will have to work towards it. We also heard that, and Grenada, I think, has offered to provide some leadership on the issue that are of major concern, synthetic biology area. I think we heard that. We also heard that in terms of we need to collaborate with other seeds and make sure we have a very strong seeds platform going forward on this. The issues relating to linkages with the actions on the ground on the national level will also be critical. Indicator development, the alignment with all 5 of the global agreements that were consummated in 2015, all 5, including the Samoa pathway, must be part of the equation going forward. We also heard that implementation. Again, sometimes we use that word several times, implementation. It means to implement. The financing requirements, the capacity building, the communications, working together. We heard all of those issues that will be very important. Finance for biodiversity. These are some critical elements, of course. And then we need to have regional approaches. But I think it's critical, what do we do between now and the COP? How do we organize ourselves as a CARICOM region, as a SEEDS region, to make our maximum presence at the COP, albeit at a virtual session? I think that is something that we have to give further cogitation on. We rightly have UNEP supporting us. We're very thankful for it, and that has already been expressed. CARICOM taking a very strong lead in the leadership of this. And that has helped us tremendously in the past, and I think it will help us even more in the future given this present dynamics. So I don't know if anyone wants to take the floor at this moment. I see a hand here. Deputy Premier, you want to take the floor?
Thank you. One last brief point, and I appreciate the indulgence because I know there are many other people who are busy and have things to do other than myself. Let us not underestimate the strength of our position as small islands and as groupings. Even though as landmass, we may not occupy as much of the globe space, but what I have come to learn is that substantial amount of the biodiversity of this planet exists within our jurisdictions. We must not underestimate that strength and that potential, and we should use that as a springboard as we move towards the COP and other global discussions around climate and the environment and biodiversity. I just don't want us to underestimate the strength and potential we have as a grouping if we can work together. So thank you for the opportunity for the intervention.
Well said, well said. Thank you very much. I see 2 hands for the floor. One.
Dr. Spencer, yes? We have Vernal Nichols and Amrika Singh.
Right, and then I think we have Grenada Environment Division. Yes, please, Vernal.
Yes, Nichols. Go ahead, Nichols.
Nichols. I think he's having difficulty.
Good morning.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, everyone. Just to let you know that it is not Mr. Nichols, it's Miss Nichols.
Oh, Vernal.
Vernal.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Right. So thanks, everyone, and I'm happy to be a part of this meeting. I've been listening in to the discussions, and the discussions are quite interesting. So while I'm not really so well informed and have the amount of knowledge that I'm hearing here, what I can say is that I think it is very interesting discussions. I'm a part of the fishing or fisheries environment, Fisherfolk for that matter. As the former chair of the Caribbean Network of Fisherfolk, but I'm the president now of the Barbados National Fisherfolk Association. I actually had to do my own Googling to get a better understanding of the discussions and what it is that y'all were really discussing and what it was about. And as I said, I think it is very interesting, especially as it relates to the fishing industry and the fisher folks, to be a part of this particular agenda. But clearly for us, as I said earlier, we are not as versed in these discussions as some of you, but the little understanding that I get from it in terms of the whole issue of the global biodiversity and what is biodiversity as fisherfolk, we certainly would like to be a part of these discussions. We would certainly like to be a part of the agenda, and that if, for me, countries can have like some focal meetings to inform us, to educate us on exactly what it is that, you know, the discussions are and how we can play our part in achieving this agenda from the fishing industry perspective, because certainly we are in the maritime space and sharing the maritime space. So what does this mean for the fishing industry in terms of biodiversity and sustainable fisheries and that kind of thing? So basically, I would just want to say that I think that, you know, we would like to have more education and understanding of the topic and where and how we can fit in to achieving this framework that is being discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nichols. Thank you very much for this intervention. And again, I know CARICOM is listening to you. They have been listening to us over this several years and really bringing this forum together, which helps in a lot of ways. And you will surprise that we will learn a lot from you and from the fishing division also, to help us to cogitate on those issues and to get up to our regional position. So we will be very happy if you can also provide a lot of your expertise to us on these areas of fishery. Thank you very much for this, and I think the Secretariat has your details, and we will be able to touch base as we go forward. I also see some other hands, but thank you very much.
Yes, Dr. Spencer, we have a colleague from Grenada and America Singh from CARICOM Secretariat.
Yes. Please go ahead.
Thanks so very much. It was only just to say thank you specifically to our SBSTTA chair, Dr. Hezekiah, and his team for the effort to have the informal virtual SBSTTA. And also, Grenada recognizes the effort to modify according to the feedback that has been given as we try to do better with respect to the country spaces and the opportunities to incorporate a whole of society approach to that actual informal virtual SBSTTA. So we recognize, for example, that each day, rather than have the formal statements all at the beginning on the first day, there will be an opportunity per each one of the papers and the key items discussed for regional interventions and other such changes that have been recommended by the islands and by other countries to help improve the opportunities in the virtual forum. So thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you, Grenada, for again bringing another very important aspects to the table. America?
Hi, thanks, Ambassador. Just to quickly say, I was intervening to say that the Nichols you were talking about was Linnell Nichols from the Union of Fisherfolk Organization. But
right.
just to clarify that, well, just to pick up on a point that Linnell made, where she indicated that we have our civil society groupings in each member state. There is a Union of Fisherfolk Organization in practically every CARICOM member state. And CARICOM Secretariat has been at pains during the webinar series and for this to make sure that our civil society groups are invited. We have the youth represented here. We have Fisherfolk. We invited the Farmers Association. So we reached out to quite a few civil society groups, but nothing takes the place because, as Vinnell indicated, you know, it's very hard for civil society groupings to parachute into a regional discussion like this, where, you know, a lot is taken for granted, that people are all on board with the issues. Nothing takes the place of having national consultations and involving your civil society groupings at the national level. So I just wanted to reiterate that for member states on this call, to please utilize the national expertise, be they technical or civil society or academic, to ensure that you have the best information that you need to engage in the negotiations. Thanks, Ambassador. That's it from me.
Thank you very much. And I know you were listening very, very, very carefully to this statement from Ms. Nichols. I know you were. And thank Aria for bringing the whole question of whole of society approach, because as we are in that situation here with the multiple crises that you are indicating, the only solution approach has to be holistic, and the whole of society approach, it has to be regional. It has to take a global space. We have to do it at all levels, and we have to do it simultaneously and with a great amount of ambition. So we need all on board, and a very inclusive program, very inclusive program. Thank you for raising this. And as I indicated, we all do benefit tremendously from having a whole of society approach.
Yes,
Okay.
Dr. Spencer Thomas, we have two more colleagues who are requesting the floor. We have Armstrong Warden Hyacinth and Natalie Budram.
Yes, of course. Let's hear everyone as much as we can. We'll be a little liberal on the timing because it is very important. The floor is open. Yes, please.
Hyacinth, do you want to go ahead first, please? It doesn't matter. You can go. It doesn't.
Okay, thanks. So this is Natalie Budram. I'm from the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute. And obviously, once civil society is mentioned, I am almost mandated to speak. So just to emphasize the points that were made about the integration of civil society into the process, and also as we have been assisting, for example, you all know we've worked on the draft CARICOM Biodiversity Strategy and the OECS Biodiversity and Ecosystems Framework, pulling in civil society views and perspectives. So just to say that we are again well placed to help as an intermediary organization, given our extensive civil society networks, to help better integrate civil society into the platforms that we are exploring, like the SBSTTA. So just to acknowledge that we're here and we're willing to assist in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Budram, for this. Thank you. Exactly the points made. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Hyacinth Armstrong Vaughan here. I am coordinating the Biodiversity and Protected Areas Management Program, BioPAMA, for IUCN. And I just also, well, I'll piggyback off of what Natalie was saying in terms of, and from the perspective of access to information and to respond to all of these questions at a regional level. We have a lot of initiatives taking place in the Caribbean at a regional level, BioPAMA included, that can facilitate and probably help countries to respond to some of the challenges and that they're facing, but also being able to present probably a more united front as a region. So building on the CARICOM Biodiversity Strategy, the OECS Biodiversity Strategy, BioPAMA program of work, the ACP MEAs work, and other initiatives in the region, I think we should also be seeing how we could pull these initiatives in to help support the countries at this level. And I would say for myself, it's for me just being aware of what is happening at this level to be able to see how we can provide the support from the work that is already taking place on the program. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we have a lot happening in the region that is potentially responding to what we need to be putting forward as a regional strategy, regional priorities. And I guess it's just to determine how we can coordinate collation of that information to have our voices better heard at the global level.
Well said, well said. I don't know what else could I say. I mean, this is one of the very important elements of that third question asked by Dr. Bala. How can the region prepare for implementing the post-2020 framework? We cannot do it without a whole of society approach. We cannot do it without involving everyone. I think that is the issue. So I think we have to, and I think CARICOM has already started to do this, to involve everyone into this decision-making space as much as is possible, and to involve and to ensure that we have sharing of the information, expertise, and so among us. So I think this is the only way we can do it. We cannot do it on individual levels. We got to do it on the collective. So that is very clear, and this has to be part of the dispensation going forward. I don't think there is any deviation from this now. It's clearly etched in the DNA of our negotiating situation going forward now. Cannot retreat on this. That will be the conclusion on this particular issue. I think it is unanimous support for a whole of society approach going forward in terms of the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework in a meaningful and effective manner. Okay, so I think we have outlasted our time. I don't see any further requests for the floor. So I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Bala and say thank you very much for the opportunity to spend the last few minutes. I hope that we are able to answer some of the questions, and at least we'll design a methodology going forward so that we'll maximize our leadership, maximize our participation and our influence on the 2020 post Global Biodiversity Framework. So thank you, and over back to you, Dr. Bala.
Thank you, Ambassador Spencer. Certainly your help, your experience, and your insights really added value to the discussion, and thank you very much for sparing time and joining us, and all the colleagues. I mean, certainly the points that were raised, including having an inclusive approach, looking at linking up with the ongoing initiatives mentioned by Hyacinth, like the BioPharma program, the focus on the regional CARICOM biodiversity strategy related issues. So certainly all the points are well noted and certainly welcomed. Of course, before we have a formal closing remarks, let me just mention a few points at this time which probably are pertinent to our thinking and our planning into the future. As mentioned, this particular program, of course, I do not want to call it as a program, because this definitely, the intention is to continue the support from UNEP into these processes into the future also. Provides a very big opportunity in terms of bringing regions together. As I mentioned that even though, particularly in terms of this particular partnership in CARICOM focuses on using the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific partnership, the MEAs program, certainly the idea is to take some of these kinds of priorities and these interests much beyond the region as well. So our intention is to also link up with colleagues in the Pacific, and certainly we have heard loud and clear on the need for linking up with countries who are actually facing similar challenges, probably will have similar opportunities, who may want to actually come together to have a single voice in terms of pushing the priorities and ensuring that the activities and the decisions that are made in COP are relevant to both their lives and livelihoods and sustainable development. So from UNEP, we actually have initiated this, so we will continue to have these kinds of briefings. Of course, I'm sure with the able support of colleagues from CARICOM Secretariat, we would certainly have more of it. But specifically, 2 or 3 points I'd like to mention is that as a follow-up to this particular briefing, if any of you are interested, please do get in touch with the colleagues in CARICOM Secretariat in terms of your ideas. We can certainly have other discussions. We can organize specific agenda-based briefings. We can also support national consultations to the extent possible in terms of both human resources and time availabilities. So certainly from UNEP, we are there to help to move the discussions forward and identify the priorities. Having said that, we're also looking at doing a similar briefing for the Caribbean region in preparation for the SBI meeting, the third meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation. There we have slated for that meeting to happen on the 3rd of March. So certainly colleagues from Telecom Secretariat would be in touch with you. So you or your colleagues, please do join us, because that is also going to be very directly relevant and related to the discussions we've been having within Substat. Because in here we are discussing about the technicalities of the issues and how to prioritize the issues, how to, work the Global Biodiversity Framework. But the SBI is going to be focusing on what is that we going to do for implementation. So certainly your participation in that meeting would also be quite helpful, and we will be in touch with that. So if you feel any of the participants, countries who are a part of this particular meeting feel that there are certain very specific interventions that you would like UNEP or CARICOM to help you with, whether doing a briefing paper, having a consultation with Pacific Island countries in preparation for these meetings, any capacity building ideas that you have, please do share. The intent is not to have a briefing session and say we have done great in terms of bringing people together, but our intent is to keep this dialogue going and to keep the partnership going as we move forward into subsequent phases of not just looking at adopting the Global Biodiversity Framework, but also having an impactful implementation of the framework in the countries where the program is currently operating. So certainly we will be in touch, and please do write to colleagues in the CARICOM Secretariat of your priorities and interventions. But don't forget also to put your name and your affiliation before you leave this meeting. And with that, I will pass on the floor to Tessia from CARICOM Secretariat for some closing remarks. And I have colleague Diane Clemmy from UNEP, who actually is working on some of these issues, who will also be providing some remarks from UNEP side. Tessia, over to you.
Thank you, Bala, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm Tisha Jabatis. I am the project coordinator for the fourth phase of the ACP MEAs project at the CARICOM Secretariat. Before I give the closing remarks, just like to reference to the Caribbean Biodiversity Strategy. We have it slated on the agenda to present at the next ministerial meeting, so we'll be providing updates on the Caribbean Biodiversity Strategy. And also to just remind our negotiators that we have provided the webinar reports, which are excellent sources of information to prepare for upcoming negotiations. So if those who do not have it, we're happy to share it with the negotiators. So we at the CARICOM Secretariat, we are most grateful for your participation and the level of awareness and the information that has been shared and received during the session. We want to thank very much all our speakers today, Dr. Douglas Slater, the Assistant Secretary General of CARICOM Secretariat, Mrs. Helena Jeffrey Brown of the Government of Antigua and Barbuda, Dr. Benitez and Mr. Shestakov, our presenter, Dr. Pisipati from UNEP and the ACP MEAs Project Manager, Honorable Walter Roban, the Deputy Premier of Bermuda, our facilitator for the discussions today, Dr. Spencer Thomas of Grenada, and of course all the other interventions from our members, our negotiators, and other participants in the meeting. Special thanks to our team of UNEP and the Secretariat, especially Ladu and Shanae, for their logistical and administrative support for such an excellent turnout, which would not be possible if they had not done what was necessary. Now, our aim is to continue to provide support to the region and to promote an integrated and synergistic approach to effectively implement the conventions on biodiversity and chemicals and waste management. So during the third phase of the ACP MEAs project, we will be building on the achievements of the previous phases and aim to further enhance the mainstreaming of and implementation of MEAs related to biodiversity and chemicals and waste, and with a focus especially on enforcement and compliance. So as Bala mentioned, we'll be hosting a briefing prior to the subsidiary body of implementation meeting that will be held on the 3rd of March. So we do look forward to your participation, and we will be following up with correspondence on this briefing following this session. So with that, I say thank you very much, and we continue to be available to support the region in our MEA implementation. Thank you very much. Over to you, Bala.
Thank you, Keisha, and certainly I'd like to recognize the excellent collaboration that we are having with CARICOM Secretariat, and thanks to colleagues in UNEP, Ladu, Lemmy, and also Rosemary Mercier for their help. And certainly I get these repeated short messages to request all the participants to share your contact information, please, because that's important for us to not just reach out, but also to prepare the report and disseminate as well. So thank you very much, and I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Diane Clemmy from UNEP. Diane, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Bala. Thank you very much, colleagues, excellencies. My name is Diane Clemmy. I'm leading the UNEP working group that supports the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, along with a whole suite of divisions and units. And Bala has requested me to provide the closing remarks. Thank you very much, Bala and Ladu, for organizing this, the Secretariat of the CBD and the Secretariat of CARICOM. The way I see it, you are the lead scientific body in the region, the Caribbean region, setting the biodiversity scientific agenda. And I see that a lot of issues on SIDS and marine biodiversity are really the ones that are really of priority to the region. And this is the time, the negotiation time, to make sure that the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, its monitoring framework, and the means of implementation is capturing all these elements, these important scientific elements. And this is a time to engage with MEA focal points, Nagoya Protocol focal points, and Cartagena focal points, as well as the focal points of the regional seas. I mean, you know that you are not alone. There are so many people to help, and engagement is really key to providing inputs really to this very ambitious framework, and ensuring that implementation is supported with a strategic also capacity building strategy. And UNEP stands ready not only through the ACP MEAs, which is a very large project that really will support you on capacity building, knowledge management, legal frameworks, but also support you on a large number of negotiation processes, preparing documents. We have a series of tools that UNEP are preparing to support the implementation of the framework, such as the data reporting tool, supporting the reporting efforts towards the CBD and other MEAs. So really, please do reach out to us and tell us what we can do to support you through this program, and the funding is available. And really, in collaboration with the CBD Secretariat, we want to make sure that we are addressing the coming decisions and working documents that are being negotiated in the best way possible. So with that, I think I'm gonna stop here. Bala, thanks, and back to you.
Thank you, Diane. And I'd like to specifically recognize the support and the encouragement we received from colleagues of the Secretariat. Neil Pratt, who's really helped us connect with the Secretary and the Chair of SBSTTA. So thank you, Neil. And also to Sasha, Alexander Sespetal, for staying with us. I know how busy you are in terms of preparing for the forthcoming meeting, but your time and interest to join this event is really sort of indication of the interest the Secretariat has in terms of engaging with as many stakeholders and as many countries as possible in preparing to deliver on the common agenda of biodiversity. So certainly I'd like to thank, and through you, Sasha, thanks to Elizabeth Marima, the Executive Secretary of the CBD, who is extremely keen, not only in terms of working on some of these issues with her mandate, but also to engage with the CARICOM Secretariat to see how the region can better partner with the CBD Secretariat in terms of finalizing the framework as well as the implementation. So with that, once again, thanks to America, thanks to Tesha for, and also to Sunay for the CARICOM Secretariat for the help, and Ladu and Rosemary from UNEP for your help. And please, again, share your contact details in the chat box before you leave the meeting. And we look forward to seeing you soon. And if there is anything we can do, please do get in touch, and we'll be happy to support. Have a great day, have a great afternoon, great evening, and certainly look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank
you very much. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, colleagues. Bye.
Thank you,
colleagues. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you for staying back. We really appreciate your time.